and COVID-free New Year. And just before we get going, I'm just going to a bit of housekeeping, fire procedure for the chamber. In case of an emergency, there are no planned fire drills for this evening. If you hear the fire alarm sound, please treat it as a real emergency and evacuate the building via the nearest safe escape route. The nearest escape route is via the stairs to your left as you leave the council chamber or public gallery. Exit via the door at the back of the building and walk across the inner car park to the evacuation point, which is the pavement opposite the police station. The lifts cannot be used in the event of an emergency. Please do not re-enter the building until you're advised it's safe to do so by a member of staff. Thank you. Okay, to the agenda. Minutes, members. Oh, and a fly just landing on me. Minutes, members, you will have seen the minutes. I was not in attendance at the last meeting, so I'm looking for somebody to approve and second the minutes. Lovely. And thank you. Bear with me just while I give my signature to these. Is it anywhere? Oh, just the one?
Right, and then it's you and Michelle.
Ah, right, yeah. And then up here.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's it, done. Lovely. Oops, sorry, Paul. Okay, members, moving on. We now come to, I think it's public question time.
Declarations of interest.
Oh, sorry, yes, declarations of interest. Anybody declarations? Michael.
On the cabinet items, there is an item about Ryde Harbour. I wish to declare that I am a member of Ryde Town Council and also the Mayor of Ryde, and therefore the other party. So I will not vote or speak on that item.
Okay, thank you very much. Karen?
Ditto, but I'm not mayor.
Good enough. Councillor Palin, yeah.
Item 7M, 7N, I'm on the East Cowes Town Council.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? I will actually declare on item 7 that I do have a green waste subscription. Very useful it has been as well.
Oh, I then have to do, it's Spartacus now. I declare that I have a green waste bin as well.
Yeah, but you don't look like old Kirk Douglas, do you?
Thank you for that. Thank you. Moving on, we have in public questions, there's no members of the public upstairs, but we do have a written public question that I shall read out, and we have a response as well. So the question is, regarding recycling of goods at the local amenity sites on the Isle of Wight, can the council look at implementing access and licence to allow a small amount of recyclers to approach residents at the tips to take away items that they may be able to upcycle, like a TV programme I have seen. I've seen this programme as well. On the TV programme Money for Nothing, I have witnessed one person has been granted allowance from the local council at the amenity site. They then upcycle or reuse or sell items that they get smashed up and thrown to landfill site. We must look at the future and encourage reuse of materials and sustainability. And the response is, the council's contract with Amy does include a reuse service for reusable items collected at the curbside and deposited on the reuse I think that's on the reuse skip at the household waste recycling centres. Reusable items collected go to a range of charities for resale to support the charities, including paint, furniture and bric-a-brac. Further, when the works at Forest Road are complete, the contract will require the facilitation of a reuse shop to directly sell items collected. We do not allow totting, direct collection of approaching visitors, directly at the sites for personal privacy and health and safety reasons. any charity or business who is interested in discussing the availability of reusable items for reuse in a charity or other setting can contact the waste team at wastecontract@iow.gov.uk. The one comment I would make is these facilities are very useful, and there are lots that we do within the council, but maybe we don't market it enough, so perhaps we should let people know more what we do. Thank you, and that response will be sent, of course, to the resident who asked the question. Members, moving on, we then have progress update. You've got in your pack all the items on the progress. I happen to know, I think Councillor Quirk has a matter to raise. Is that correct, Councillor Quirk?
On the 9th of November, public question time, a written response was promised to the people asking the question, and they've contacted me to say that they've not received a written response.
Ah, right. Okay. Is there anybody online or anywhere that would know the answer to this? Chris, can you just switch your microphone on?
Right, Chairman, we can chase up the Cabinet member to make sure that they provide a response.
Okay, thank you. Members, have you any other matters or issues on this paper? No, I have one comment. On that same page, just below that, we've got the Alawite Community Safety Partnership Annual Report. Details of the strategic plan aimed at reducing reoffending be circulated to the committee by a Community Safety Operations Manager. I don't think I've seen this. I'm pretty sure I haven't. If any other members have, perhaps you will correct me, but we haven't had that yet. Is that correct?
We will chase that up, Chairman.
Chase that as well. Lovely. Thank you. Okay, members, any other matters on that? No? Okay, then we're moving on. We're at the Draft Island Planning Strategy Task and Finish Group. Councillor Spink, if you would like to just give us a bit of a précis of that.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, well, I'm pleased to say a little delayed, but nevertheless now the report has been prepared. We found a number of findings, as it were, and made some recommendations. I won't go through all of those because hopefully you've had a chance to read the report or will have the chance, but perhaps summarising what could be considered to be the main findings, page 19 of your bundle. We were concerned, or are concerned, by the summary that was prepared for the consultation, so the summary of the DIPs. We've took the view that many people will have relied on the summary when deciding whether to take part in the consultation, and if so, what their response would be. And from speaking to people, I've yet to find hardly anyone amongst the public who has read the whole thing or even portions of it. So the summary is quite important. We found, and it's set out there, paragraphs 14 and 15, a number of inadequacies in the summaries, and at times, by being so brief, it, in our view, was potentially misleading. We don't make a specific recommendation as such, we simply find that that was so. Certainly, it could be said that it will mean that the responses can have less weight attached to them than they would otherwise have. And it is open to interpretation as well, that perhaps by default, as it were, not by intent, but that the consultation hasn't been completely open and transparent. But what the consequences of that are is not really for us to say. That's our finding. In particular, just to deal with in particular why we've come to that conclusion. In our submission, the summary paints a slightly rosier picture than the detail. And if one looks at the detail, and it's set out in full in the report, so I won't take up your time, but perhaps one of the most striking matters that were certainly striking to me was that to explain the reduction to 486 houses per year from 600 plus, it says that 75 sites have been removed from the previous version of the draft plan. Well, that is absolutely correct. But of those 75 sites, there is information in the evidence papers to show that 51 of those are expected to come back in again as exception sites. And in my view, things like that should be made clear to the public. And there are a number of them which are important. So I would urge you all please to read that quite carefully. The other thing that we found is, and would ask that it stays live as it were, is that it is expected that there will be a change in planning direction. The government has indicated that. We don't know the precise details, but it looks as if they are going to not, as it were, centralize planning. In fact, if anything, they're going to give more power, I'm pleased to say, to local authorities. In addition, there's likely to be greater protection for greenfield. And I've even heard it said, fingers crossed, that the mandatory targets might be scrapped. But I don't know if that will come about. And it does seem to me that the course of the dips will be very much dependent on, and the content of it will be very much dependent on what those changes are when they're known. Michael Gove did say, rather as if it's a Christmas present, that he'd let us know before Christmas, but he doesn't seem to have delivered his present yet. So one of the things that I would ask that are kept in mind would be the possibility of a exceptional circumstances case for the island. It's been ruled out for the time being, but for the reasons that I've set out in the report, I would ask that it still be kept as a consideration. The next recommendation is that there should be a further reduction in the numbers of housing to 300 per year or less. The reasoning for that is on the figures produced in the DIPS, the average number, and there's an error here, but that the average number per year from 2012 is 364. The report says 325, so that's an error. 364 is the average figure. If we fail to make the target of 480, we will then either be placed back in or remain in the tilted balance. And that, in my submissions, a very poor thing for the island. 300 or less seems to me to be deliverable and also aspirational within the NPPF, particularly if one adds into the current situation the uncertainties of COVID, which has reduced house building, particularly on the island, with increased construction costs and difficulty finding builders and tradesmen. So to put a higher figure than we've been able to build on average in the last 8 years seems to me to be a rather dangerous policy. And so I would urge reconsideration of that figure. There's a recommendation that further research should be carried out to put a local condition on new developments, so that the complaint that many members of the public have, which is to some extent justified, is that new developments are being sold to retirees from the mainland, second homers, Airbnb landlords. We did raise in the course of the committee meetings, we did raise that could such a clause, a condition be added to planning consents? And the view of the planning officers was probably not. We raised, on the basis that it wouldn't be enforceable, we raised the example of Cornwall, which the newspapers had reported, had declared a ban, as it were, on second homers. There was a degree of uncertainty as to how that had been achieved. So we would ask that there's further consideration of that. It's a bit of a cliche because everyone agrees it, but it's a little more difficult to put into practice, but we've recommended it anyway with some ways in which it could perhaps be put in practice, is that affordable housing must be affordable to islanders on or below the average island income. Otherwise, in our submission, there's very little point in building the homes, and very little point certainly in building the 65% non-affordable homes to achieve homes, as it were, at 35% of homes which still aren't affordable. So it seems to me to be a nonsensical situation that we're in at the moment, and there are some ways set out there that we could perhaps change that. Turning to, we've concentrated, I should say, we've concentrated on the housing and aspect, the planning aspect, and the environment. The time that we had in consideration as sitting as a committee hasn't really allowed for us to do considerably more than that. That's not a criticism, just a statement of the situation. So as far as the environment is concerned, we would like to see in the DIPs much greater reference to the UNESCO biosphere, and in particular, how the UNESCO biosphere can work together with, as it were, development. Because there's a real link to be made between the biosphere and the way that the community lives, as it were, within the biosphere. And so I have asked that Councillor Jonathan Bacon perhaps considers setting out in more detail the relationship between planning development and the biosphere. The other recommendation, or another recommendation in terms of the environment, is that we would like greater emphasis to be placed on ensuring that infrastructure is in place, either before development commences or is occupied. There is considerable concern, and I'm sure we're all aware of it, about the lack of infrastructure and simply going on building more and more houses. And we would like to see much more use made of what's called Grampian clauses, where it's a condition that the infrastructure will be in place, either before the development commences or before any occupation takes place. We were surprised to learn that Southern Water is not a statutory consultee to planning applications. And we have recommended that for major developments, i.e. 10 or more, they should either become a statutory consultee, or if that's not possible, the island should have its own policy of making sure that Southern Water are contacted in all major developments. Great reliance in the DIPs is placed on, in terms of the environment, mitigation, followed by compensation. And we would like to see greater emphasis put on avoidance. There has been a recent report of the Environmental Audit Committee that says that compensation and mitigation just isn't working. For a variety of reasons, the conditions, as it were, of mitigation and compensation aren't properly chased up. This is the findings of the Audit Committee, not my finding or our findings. And that it's failing the environment. And in the current climate, no pun intended, but in the current climate, that's particularly worrying. It also is the case that the enforcement section of the planning service here is perhaps under-resourced and can only chase up a very small amount of breaches. And so to rely heavily on mitigation and compensation is, of course, in our submission of concern. Finally, as far as, well, penultimately, we're concerned also about the Solent European sites and the nitrates that are released into the Solent. I've written to Natural England because in particular there is a clause in the draft plan that says that if the sewer of a new development will connect to Sandown, then it's deemed to be nitrate neutral as far as the Solent is concerned. And our research has shown that although new developments by and large are planned, as it were, to connect to Sandown, they still en route storm discharge into the Solent. And that is of concern. I've written to Natural England. Natural England responded today in quite a long letter, and before I address you on that, I'd like to consider it, but that is something that is ongoing. Finally, we commend, as it were, the setting up of a dark skies park in the southwest of the island. We recommend that there be further consideration to extending that park. Certainly in the West Wight, which is where the park is, or in the Southwest Wight, certainly in the West Wight in general, there are very few streetlights and it's largely rural, and it is quite suitable in our submission to being a dark skies park. And if one were to extend it to the AONB on the Hampstead Heritage Coast and Newtown Creek, and also extended it, there would then be, as it were, an AONB on the south side of the island, an AONB on the north side of the island of the West Wight. And if one looks at the map of the island, there's then a very slim corridor, sometimes called the Kelbourne Corridor, running between the two. Now that is fundamentally rural with, if I say no streetlights, I may be mistaken, but there's very few streetlights. And we would suggest that there's a really fantastic and exciting opportunity of making the whole of that area a dark skies park, which would be beneficial to biodiversity and also to the ecotourism that the West Wight depends on. So that is it in the main, but if you haven't had a chance yet, I do ask you please to read the report. I'm very happy if we've got time to take any questions.
Thank you, Councillor Spink. I would just say from the off, I think it's a fabulous report and a lot of hard work put in by yourself and your committee. Excellent piece of work. And yeah, anybody wish to comment?
Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, I've got Councillor Medland, then Councillor Robertson. Yeah, we'll go to him after.
Is that working?
Yeah, fine.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd just like to congratulate Councillor Spink on his report. I do actually agree with every recommendation. I was very impressed with it. I thought I'd just quickly say, I think part of the reason we didn't talk about the rest of the draft islands strategic plan is that actually, I think most of it's actually very, very good. It's the housing targets, I think, were particularly the problem. Yeah. Because it just made no sense of the wording in the rest of the plan. You know, the rest of the plan was towards sustainability, and then we had housing allocations that are completely don't make any sense in terms of sustainability. So I think it was trying to reconciling that problem. I think we were largely dealing with. So I think that the target is correct and the approach is correct. I'm very much in support of the final report.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. I've got a virtual, I'm going to go to him in a minute, but I'm going to come to Councillor Robertson first. We have a virtual cabinet member wish to speak in a minute, I do believe, with a hand up. Councillor Robertson.
Thank you, Chair. Like Councillor Medland, I agree it's an excellent report, very thorough, and exactly what scrutiny is about, I think. My concern is that the good contents of the draft island plan strategy may be watered down. And I refer particularly to the priority of brownfield sites. I have put correspondence out in the press earlier this week to express disappointment that Camp Hill, while in the draft island plan strategy is referred to as a key priority site, the Cabinet appear to be now describing it as not a priority. And my concern is the reason for that is that the council doesn't own the land. Well, this is a planning strategy. It's not a document of council-owned land. Something can be a priority without the council owning it. Indeed, there's an application that's been made very recently in my own ward for a bit of land that's in the draft island planning strategy that's not owned by the council. So that land has already been subject to a planning application. So I urge the Cabinet not to view priorities as land that the council owns. This is a strategy document for bringing forward brownfield land in front of greenfield land. And brownfield land can be hard to develop. It can have complications attached to it, decontamination, removal of buildings. It would be a great shame if those challenges meant that that land was put on the backbone burner and some easy greenfield sites were seen as easy targets. That would be a great shame, and it would be a problem to, I'm sure, a great many councillors if we ended up going down that route. I urge the Cabinet to show ambition and leadership in bringing forward difficult brownfield land.
Thank you for that. Any other committee members?
Councillor Quigley.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Quigley, yes, and then Councillor Quirk,
And then Councillor.
and then Councillor Lilly.
I think there's no doubt, Councillor Spink, you put a lot of work into this. You can see that, and it's a lot of it's very good. The bit I'm going to disagree with is the harmsy target, because it's quite confusing. On the back of what Joe said, he put a letter out this week. I don't know if you know about the prisons. Is that if you take into account what you're saying, is you wouldn't be able to develop the prison site at fast enough speed to make it work. Because you reduce the target to 300 dwellings a year, even if you manage to make all of them at the prison site, there'll be no building anywhere else. So it doesn't make common sense. I think we need to look seriously at what the target is. I think it needs to be split down into what is required to solve the housing issue on the island rather than just a guess. If you come back and said it's 300 based on 264 affordable rents with the rest either shared ownership, I'd have got that. But I think we're in danger of just reducing the target based on what we think developers can achieve. The other thing is we're not suffering from a glut of social housing applications, because if we were, the tilted development in favour, sorry, whatever we want to call it, would work in our favour. Because if we had a glut of social housing applications, it would mean we have to build them, and we haven't. So I think we have to be really very careful where we're going with this. We're on a bit of a sticky wicket about a housing number. But other than that, I think you've done a lot of hard work, Peter.
Thank you for that. Right. Councillor Quirk.
I do agree with the proposals in this. I also agree with the comments about the brownfield sites, because we do need to look at all of our brownfield sites, and the only way that we can put the affordable housing that we need is to do major developments with funding from Homes England, and we've got the vehicle to do that, but they're only interested in large sites that are going to really deliver, but they have the capacity to give more than the 20% that the government sort of regards as the affordable limit. And of course, 60% is the figure in the Isle of Wight, not 80%. So I agree with what's in this. I would move that we recommend acceptance of this report by the Cabinet.
Thank you very much for that. And then Councillor Lilly. I'll come to Cabinet members shortly, by the way.
Thank you. I mean, I'm going to put a similar proposal that Councillor Quirk was going to put, and I'm happy to second his. I think the important thing that this is sent to the Cabinet Member of Planning as part of the Island Plan consultation. That's why we've looked at it, and I think it feds in. And I don't, and I also thank Councillor Spink for his work. I did take part in some of the things, but thank you for the final effort of writing it all up and getting it done. So thank you. And I think in the main, from my memory of those discussions, it's an accurate record and within that. And I think it's important to note by this committee that the planning team enthusiastically took part and contributed, particularly James Brewer and Ollie Bolter. And in fact, they've reported that they actually found those discussions beneficial. So I think it's important that we note that that task and finish group wasn't just a group of councillors having our bit. It was an open discussion that was with the staff team, which I think is a good model for the future in this kind of way. I do have one issue on the report. The rest I totally support. Is the uncomfortableness of the figure, right? Which I, in fact, agree with Councillor Quigley on this. We have a real social housing need, and we've got to tackle that, right? And in fact, I think that the Cabinet Member, the Deputy Leader, is particularly leading on trying to do that and target brownfield sites and getting funding for a certain amount of sites successfully recently. I would prefer, in supporting this, that the actual figure 300 was taken out, but we actually put a lower figure, because I think there is an element of we need to fit to what we can achieve. I think that message, I agree. As an island, we have issue with building materials coming over, the skills. On big sites, we have to have building expertise, builders from the mainland in caravans, on site and building that, because we haven't got necessarily those skills. We should be looking at more towards skill training and training people. I would like to see future contracts of housing on the island that actually has some job creation. This has been done right across the country. In the north of England, it was pioneered, where all building contracts actually had to create so many training or trainee or apprenticeships for local people to learn those skills. I would like, that's for another discussion, but I would like to sort of see this. I feel that if we fix ourselves to a figure of 300, I feel that just causes difficulty. I'm uncomfortable with that, particularly on the grounds as outlined eloquently by Councillor Quigley within that. But I do agree that there is a mismatch of perhaps the figure and what we can actually achieve. And I accept your point that could cause us problems. It's better to be honest of what we can do within that. But I'm uncomfortable to totally support that figure of 300.
Thank you, Councillor Lilly. And of course, we still have to bear in mind that we don't just make this up and produce it and there's a document and that's the end of it. We have to get it past an inspector. I'll come to you in a minute, Councillor Payne.
May I just respond? Responding to Councillor Quigley and to Councillor Lilly, the figure, it's not a precise art, and indeed the figure of 486, there is simply based, if one reads all of the supporting documents, is simply based on what it's considered is deliverable on the island. So that's why I've concentrated on. There's no evidence, as it were, that 486 is the right figure, other than the fact that there is a difficulty building a number of houses on the island, a difficulty building the 600 plus that the government target is, and that 486 has been established, as it were, as, to use the expression, deliverable and aspirational. So there is no, as I understand it, formula behind the 486. But I am happy simply to leave the recommendation that it should be looked at and consideration given to a further reduction. And perhaps the appropriate reduction is the number of houses on average that have been built since 2012 per year. Because from my research, which is limited into the construction industry, but it may well be that the construction industry is going to be in difficulty over the next few years, and to achieve more than the average that has been achieved since 2012 may just be setting ourselves up to fail. I'd just like to make it clear, finally, that I very much support, so that Councillor Quigley knows, social housing. I think there is, and more research I would need to do on this, certainly, but I think, as Councillor Quigley says, there is money to be had from Homes England. And if we were to pioneer the building of what people used to call council housing, that's certainly what I would like to see, for rent and secured for the community in perpetuity, so no right to buy. And if we concentrated on that, we could solve, working on, say, 300 houses a year and just building that, we could solve the housing register of 2,000 in 6 years, something like that. Maybe we need to do it more quickly, but there's no point, as it were, being tied to an impossible, or what might be an impossible target. But I certainly would like to see social housing being the priority of the draft planning strategy, rather than relying on affordable housing produced by private developers, and the discount is never enough to make them affordable to islanders. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Spink. Good points, well made. Councillor Palin.
Thank you. I share much of the comments Councillor Quigley said. On a whole, we, believe the recommendations correspond fairly well with the comments we submitted as iWorks. We welcome much of it. However, along with other iWork members, we do have serious concerns over the risk of lowering the housing number down to 300, because we are facing a housing crisis. Islanders need homes, affordable homes, more so. And the risk of lowering the number from 486 down to 300 risks the island planning strategy being thrown out by inspectors, because actually there's a lot of evidence, obviously, within the planning strategy as well as this, showing that we need those houses. And like we mentioned about Camp Hill, that could meet that quota for 1 year. So I support much of the recommendations, as do iWork, but reducing the number down to 300, we cannot support. And if it were to be passed to the cabinet, we'd feel far more comfortable with that number either being taken out or stating we support the administration's 486.
Thank you very, very much for that. Any further comments from the committee? Then no. Then I will go across now to our virtual cabinet members. Paul Fuller first, if we can make contact.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Chairman, and thank you, Councillor Spink, for putting together those points that was raised. First of all, I'd like to say that with a lot of the feedback that we've received from stakeholders, we are getting a lot of people saying that the 486 figure is probably too low, which again is something that will raise concerns. That 486 figure that is being used is a figure that we want to make sure is sustainable when we go to our planning inspector. And I think that is one of the concerns that we have. We were speaking to the QC, Michael Bedford, a couple of weeks ago, and one of the things that he raised with us was that if you suppress that figure too low, then what we could find is that the planning inspector may turn around and say, start again. If we start again, that could mean that we have no policy in place for a number of years, and that is a bit of a worry that I have, certainly as cabinet member for housing and planning. One of the things that the cabinet, the QC is doing is he is writing a report, and what I think would be quite important is that when we do have that report from the QC, and that is circulated to all members of the Isle of Wight Council, so he can share with us his views on some of the representations that have been made. The development of brownfield sites, absolutely buy into that, and I know that most of the members of, or all members of the cabinet will feel the same thing. Brownfield sites should be a priority for development, and that is embedded within the council's corporate plan. So we also welcome that as well. Again, one of the other things that we also have to bear in mind is that the government still has an annual housing target of creating 300,000 new homes every year. And that is what is embedded within the National Planning Policy Framework. And that is what we are working to. And we need to be able to make sure that any scrutiny, any challenge of the housing figures is reflective of that as well. We may not like that 300,000 housing figure, but that unfortunately is something that government is actually instilling upon local councils. And again, the arguments and the evidence that we need to fight that is something that is required. So I'm very happy to work with Councillor Spink and the Scrutiny Committee to see what we can do. And again, once that evidence or once we have that feedback from the QC, I'm very happy to share that, because I think that will help to shape what the cabinet will be saying. I think that Councillor Bacon will probably want to speak about the dark skies. Again, dark skies is something that is really out of our hands, but again, I'm sure that Councillor Bacon will have a view on the dark skies park. Again, that is nothing that is dictated to by the Isle of Wight Council. That is something that comes has to fit with fairly strict criteria by another agency. So thank you for that, and thank you very much for Councillor Spink and the councillors that have supported him with this report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fuller. Yeah, we're going to go to Councillor Bacon now. Hopefully.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening. I do have a few comments. I've been scribbling furiously, so I've got a lot of notes in front of me because I think there are a few things that need to be just mentioned further to some of the comments that have been made. Firstly, I have to raise a few concerns about the report because while there's some very good things in there, there are some things that have attracted some raised eyebrows, and it has been noted that it's an issue with the report that it doesn't contain details of the membership of the committee, the methodology followed, the evidence that was considered other than the list of names, and how that evidence was considered. And as I say, that's a problem for some of the recommendations that are made, but I don't detract from the fact there is some good stuff in there. Councillor Hastings made a very pertinent comment that we have to be conscious of evidence and that I think what he said was this has to go through a government inspector. and the government inspector relies on evidence to form his view. And as Councillor Palin said, we can't afford to take risks. The key is putting forward a planning strategy. What can we evidence? And Councillor Fuller's referred to the QC, who has been giving advice and is preparing an advice that I believe is going to be circulated as soon as it's he's given oral advice, but the written version, I believe, Paul, is going to be circulated once it's available, and that is going to be an important document. In the meantime, I believe there is a briefing on Friday, and planning officers have prepared some notes on the task and finish group report, and I think those are due to be circulated at or before that meeting. I'm not going to read the whole thing out. There's about 10 pages I've seen, but again, it's much of the commentary does relate to what can actually be evidenced, and as I say, I think it's therefore slightly unfortunate that we don't have a better body of evidence or evidence that was referred to attached to the task and finish group report. If I could just raise a few things, as I say, I was scribbling as people were speaking. The comments on the summary, and particularly the point about 75 sites being removed. Councillor Spink said 51 are expected to return. That's not quite what it says. It's 51 sites could still come forward. So there's a difference there, and we need to be careful how things are read so that hares are not set running unnecessarily. We obviously still wait on the government to make this hoped for change in planning direction. The indications are minimal at the moment that is going to happen, or certainly happen timorously, and we can't sit back just waiting for something to happen that might not happen. And as I say, the indications aren't very positive at the moment. We of course agree with the idea of protecting our greenfield and using brownfield sites. I was a little disappointed in Councillor Robertson's comments about Camp Hill, where he was suggesting that greenfield sites were being actively prioritised. I'm not sure if he's read Councillor Stevens' response to his open letter that appeared in the press, which made it clear that it's not a case of Camp Hill being forgotten about, but where one must prioritise what is feasible and viable, and what is being done is to advance 3 brownfield sites, in respect of which close to £1 million of funding has been obtained to put those into use. So that's why Camp Hill slips a little down the priority register, if you like, because we have money to activate brownfield sites, not other greenfield sites, as Councillor Robinson seemed to be suggesting.
Councillor Bacon, sorry to interrupt you.
Yes.
Whilst it's very interesting to hear what you have to say, the job of this committee is really now to approve or otherwise this report.
Indeed, which is why I thought it was worth commenting on things that you are seeking to.
Yes, I understand that, and I mean the detail is very interesting, but it's going perhaps a little bit too deep for this moment in time, because we need to deal with approval or otherwise.
Can I deal
and then it will come to the cabinet, and then the response from the cabinet from there with more detail.
Okay, I will cut down what I was going to say, but I think I would still make a couple more comments, because I think that the committee should be mindful of them if you are putting forward recommendations.
Okay, bear with you for a while.
I'll be as brief as I can. Exceptional circumstances has been raised. This is something that's going to feature in the QC's report. And, well, to summarise very briefly, he says there's absolutely no evidence that's been put forward throughout the consultation that would support a case for exceptional circumstances. I would like to explain that more, but we'll leave that. On the second homes issue, yes, Cornwall have said they're doing it. I'm not sure there's any evidence that they've achieved it. And again, the Task and Finish Group report doesn't give us anything to judge that by. On the environment side, I very much agree with the support for the biosphere. I think I made it clear myself when the draft strategy came out that I didn't think there was enough biosphere in there, and I want to see more. We are actively, excuse me, actively putting forward ideas and suggestions for how the biosphere can be better managed and taken forward. So that is all in progress. The infrastructure point, very good. I'll say no more about that. Paul did say about dark skies. I'll say this now because it has been raised. I was going to say it hopefully a little later in the meeting because there's a dark skies paper coming forward. The area, it would be great if the whole island could be a formally recognised dark skies park, but it simply can't happen. The two things that guide this, the quality of lighting and the prevalence of lighting, and also what the body in Arizona, International Dark Skies Association, requires is an area that has a clear management structure in relation to it. And therefore, that is why the existing, as it were, quadrant of the island has been selected. That has taken about 4 years to achieve that. So we're not going to suddenly try and change that at this point. What we want to do is get that accreditation for where we can satisfy the rules for Arizona. But let's not mix up the Dark Skies Park accreditation and wider policy considerations. In the island strategy, so I can't hear that. In the island strategy, we are talking about lighting policy to cover the whole island. But in terms of the Dark Skies Park, we have to satisfy very specific requirements set by...
Councillor Bacon, I'm sorry, I have to stop you at that point. Yeah, we're going to go on to dark skies on the cabinet paper anyway, a bit later. I need to get on to committee members. But thank you for that.
Shall we go?
Councillor Lilly.
Good time to this item. We have a huge other agenda within this. Can we move on? We've got a proposal
yes, can you put your microphone on? Councillor Lilly, can you put your microphone on, please? Thank you.
I think the proposal was that a report and proposed recommendations be noted, right? And the report is sent to the Cabinet Member of Planning as part of the Island Plan consultation with the comments made at this meeting. Right? Is that roughly?
Councillor Quirk, is that pretty much how, yeah, okay, that's fine. Okay.
And I second Councillor Quirk's motion.
Therefore, members, those four. Thank you very much. That's unanimous. Okay. We did. We'll have to cut on. Right. Next on our agenda, digital strategy, council website. Now, I believe, Paul, we've got Councillor Garrett wishes to. Councillor Garrett. Oh, hello. Good evening to you. The Chairman of Audit Committee is going to introduce this item. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just check by seeing if you nod that you can hear me? I see nods. That's great. Thank you, Chair. So audit and scrutiny are like the two sides of a coin. We've got distinct roles to play, but we are in fact part of this, an ultimately the same beast of making sure that the council delivers well on its services and delivers value for money. From the audit committee side of things, of course, I just rehearsed that. That's very much to look at the financial and non-financial performance, particularly where there's an increase in the council's vulnerability to things going wrong, and if things do go wrong to oversee that arrangements are in place to manage these. So in July this year, we took a report on the digital strategy, and a number of concerns were obvious within that. There was only limited assurance was given to this area of the council's work, and specifically there were 5 high risk and 1 medium risk exceptions in that. It was recognised by the internal auditors that there were obvious impacts from the COVID-19 pandemic, but notwithstanding those, that there had been no clear objectives or timescales agreed for the overall project, that the first phase had not been generally understood, not achieved its generally understood aim, and that there were significant issues with governance, resourcing, and the work completed to date. So we took an update report in September this year, in which it was acknowledged by the Chief Internal Auditor through her report that significant progress, positive progress, had been made on the various points that they had raised, not least the putting in place of a project implementation document. But in our discussions, it became clear that obviously, whilst Audit Committee can deal with so much, that some of the issues were very much in your committee's sphere, Chair, around scrutiny, around the decisions made on policy. Specifically, the decision to develop the new website in-house rather than going out to market to seek an established provider, and in some sense an off-the-peg website. None of these things can ever be off the peg. There will always be unique things that have to be in any implementation, so we felt as a committee that was very much in the remit of corporate scrutiny to examine, and probably examine other items around, more generally, those items of ensuring that resourcing, particularly staff resourcing, is in place for projects, and that projects are properly and appropriately project managed. And that the governance side of things, particularly the involvement of elected members, of involvement of councillors in that governance side of things, is well understood and in place. If there were 3 questions, and obviously I can't direct your committee, Chair, but if there were 3 questions, I'd be very interested to hear your committee address, and then perhaps send messages back to the committee that I chair, Audit Committee. Those questions are around what is it that particularly made the council confident that an in-house web development was the best solution here, and how much of that has now proven to be a contributing factor to some of the shortfalls that audit found. A second question might be that had COVID not happened, would these issues have not arisen in the first place? So how much of this is a COVID factor? And third, although it may indeed still rest as a question with audit, but you might want to probe as well. Had audit not identified the various issues, had we not an internal audit function, would they otherwise have been identified as shortfalls, shortcomings within the project, and thus perhaps led the council to be continuing with a project that was beginning to potentially fail, and obviously then that carries with it the impact on spend of public money, but also impact on the reputation of the council in delivering service, and ultimately on failing to deliver a modern website as part of the overall digital strategy. I'll rest it there. I'm sure your discussion will focus more on amongst yourselves. You do have the Vice Chair of Audit as a member of your committee, so but I will be here to answer any questions if there are any from my committee's perspective. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Garrett. Right, members, straight in for Councillor Lilly. I suspected that would be the case.
As the Vice chair of audit, and actually at the meeting when this was fully discussed and part of the recommendation that it should come to this committee, I will have a proposal that I would like to put forward. And I welcome the report from Claire Shand and Councillor Stevens. I think that we do need to perhaps ask some questions, but my view is that we need to put this on the work plan, and that's going to be my recommendation, and that we definitely ask for reports to come back to us so that we can monitor and assess this, because I think it is something we need to share with audit. Obviously, it has come up through the external audits and raised an issue. It's an historic issue. It goes back a period of time, as it says in the report in front of us. But it's something we've got to address. And actually, the website is the upfront image of this council. And we have to say that it's pretty poor. And in fact, many residents, come. It's a particular issue on planning, which I'm chair of. And I'm sure Councillor Quirk, as a previous chair of planning, will sort of say that people, it doesn't function to the level of quality that it should. But it's also a very, the website is very clumsy, finding information, etc. And if our front-facing access to our community isn't all singing, all dancing, it's not actually telling us the true story of what we're trying to do in our community. We're selling ourselves short, right? So we need to look at this, and we need to get this absolutely right. I believe that the cabinet member, well, the deputy leader who's leading on this under his portfolio, is now getting to tackle that. That was reported at audit, but we do need to address it. So I'll come back to a proposal, but my big question is, why aren't we working in partnership with other local authorities? Because other local authorities have the same issues, right? Have to, they do the same services, and some of them are doing it extremely well. Why do we have to reinvent the wheel when we can actually get it from another authority who's got a very well-oiled machine? And I particularly would like to put that question to the cabinet member, the deputy leader, who's responsible for this.
Okay, thank you very much for that. We'll go on to Councillor Stevens in a minute. He wanted to speak on the last matter, so we'll bounce back to him in a minute. Councillor Palin.
Thank you. I think this question will also be put to the deputy leader, but given the level of work, given the value of the work that the work for the Alawite Council was it tendered for? Was the work for the website tendered for? And if so, on what framework? If it wasn't tendered for, why wasn't it put out to a competitive tender, given the Alawite Council's poor record of website usability?
Come back to that. Councillor Midland.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd also like to thank staff and cabinet for the detailed report. The thing that struck me in reading the report, which is really concerns me, considering this is such an important strategic issue, as Councillor Lilly said, this is our shop window, this is our interactive face with the community. We've got to get this right, really. And looking at the risk management strategy, it's quite scary to see, we've got here, 11 identified risks, Three of them are, oh, sorry, it's page 50 in the corporate scrutiny papers, by the way. We've got 3 rated high, 6 medium, and we've got, that's under the probability that might go wrong. That's 9 out of 11 high or medium, and then we've got the impact either medium, 3 or 4 high, so 7 medium or high, and then we've got another 4 very high. You know, this is worrying. You know, if any of this goes wrong, it's going to be fundamentally have a fundamental impact on us. I would like the deputy leader to, I'd like us to take a bit of a pause, have a look at this again a little bit more carefully just before we plunge forward, because I'm rather concerned about this, how this could go wrong.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Robertson.
Thank you, Chair. Just to endorse really what Councillor Lilly was saying, and particularly his comments on putting on the work plan, but also Councillor Medland as well. I think there are details here that need to be got under the skin of, and it's not something that can be done in one meeting on one night. It's obviously an ongoing issue that still has the ability to spiral out of control. Particularly in relation to those high and very high risk factors. I just pulled one out from page 50, inability, so this is the risk, inability of the project team to work together effectively due to opposing viewpoints, high, very high. So I think if this can go on the work plan, I think that would be a good way of dealing with it going forward.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think it needs to go on and be monitored, as yourself and Councillor Lilly have said. That's important, and we will do that. But I think any other committee members to comment? No, then yes, Councillor Downer.
Well, I'm no expert on any of these things, but what I would like to say is that you've got to have a website that's fit for purpose for all residents and also members and staff, because then it projects a good image. And yes, a good image. And I'll endorse what Councillor Lilly spoke about the actual website. And before they had the new planning portal, I would say that this might sound a bit going back. The old way of the planning, looking at the applications and everything, wasn't too bad. But with this new thing, and I've had loads of complaints from residents as well, that, you know, they've got to search and go into all 7, and half the time it don't work. Well, that's not good enough, is it? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that. Yeah, and the thing that I keep getting coming at me regularly is accessibility. And I think that really falls down on that matter. Let's go and hear from Councillor Stevens, shall we?
Hello there.
Councillor Stevens, come in.
I'm coming in from Ryde. How's that? Right. Thank you very much indeed. All comments are valid. I'm going to say all comments are valid that have been made, from putting it on a work plan to actually the planning portal to resource. I'm sorry that I came in May this year rather than May 4 years ago, because quite honestly, well, even further back than that, because this dates about 2018, 2019. I think the paper as sets out here, you're talking about way back, you know, and putting things forward through talking with central government and becoming an IT centre for excellence, if you like, in local government. And I think that's where we were going with this, and we will get there. We will get there. I think that we're getting the structure in place now. I'd like to thank audit. I'd like to thank internal audit and also the audit committee, because we gave it a good. We got a good steer, and I think that both Claire Shand and indeed the IT manager will back me on that, to say that we've actually turn the ship round. It's been difficult, but we've actually done it. I noted that someone mentioned about COVID, and you know, if COVID hadn't been there, would that not have had the effect of putting us behind time, etc.? It would have had an effect of actually a more positive effect. But as I've said to the officers, when they doubt themselves on this, that to be quite candid, we can't count the cost in saved lives on this island from actually resourcing as we did, and as the previous administration did. Don't forget, it was your decision, Councillor Hastings, along with others, that actually moved staff away from a project, quite a considerable amount of money as well affected there. But did we have a decision to make, or was it forced on us? That's the thing with where we had to go for the resources. What I would say about the Isle of Wight Council, and indeed the IT department, was when people had to work from home, and I look at your administration on this, Councillors Hastings and Quirk, that you actually got the IT department to do this remote working, and that's what saved the bacon of this council during the pandemic. So whilst we're out there fighting the fight and saying everything's wrong with IT, there were some damn good things done. Now, what I would say about the website project is that was the correct framework put in place? Were the evaluations made? Quite rightly, Councillor Palin said, reference the situation with going out to tender and things like that, or moving in that sort of way. Did we go out? No, we didn't. I'll leave that to the officers or the staff to state what they did and why they did it, and how they were led by the membership at the time. Because, as I said, we've got 3 tranches of funding here on this project, and I have not had to point in any direction for the finance of this project. So I think that what we've done is we've continued on your line, but we've actually now started to put in place the governance that was lacking, and actually looked at the implementation of the project and where we're going, getting the scrutiny right now and building it up. It was lacking in the past. This is something I've inherited. I haven't shouted about it. We got on with the job and the task in hand. We're going to continue with it. If we pulled the plug now, we would lose a few $100,000. But what you've got to realise is that I'm gathering information on a regular basis from around the country, and I would say that Rugby Borough Council and Cornwall and a couple of other councils went in together, and they're spending on a 6-month project $350,000 on a waste contract to connect their waste in with their call centre and what have you. So you've got to take into consideration the amount that IT and indeed data transfer costs. And I think that when you realise that our corporate IT did it in-house and not asking for another penny, but got on and did the job, I think you've got to rate our corporate IT doing that well, because they've taken on handling the waste contract from the general public. And as I said, it costs £350,000 elsewhere. So looking at the so-called plus side, if you can call it a plus side, we did that in-house for the cost of our IT department. You know, these things happen. They shouldn't happen, but if we get off on the wrong foot, and trust me, I've been involved with many projects, and if you haven't got it right on day 1, then by day 21, it starts to go out of kilter. And so all I want to say is that we didn't tender. Why? I don't know, because I wasn't there and I haven't posed that question. I've taken I've taken the comment and the arguments to the officers. We've now got someone on the project board. We've got things moving. I think that I'll bring in Claire Shand in a moment to let her continue, if you wouldn't mind, Chair, because I think there's a few things there from the early days that she might wish to talk about. But as I say, I've done what I can to get this back on track and make sure that the money that's already been spent is not wasted. Because if you look at the amount of money it is, it's certainly an element of council tax there. I would say about the planning portal that Councillor Down has mentioned. That's going out on the old site, and we've got a problem with that, and IT are working with the contractors for, I think it's IDOCS or something, the contractor with the planning group. Sometimes these things look like they're on the IT website, on the corporate IT website, and they're not. And we've got to realise that you know, I've always said, both to Roger Brown and indeed to Claire Shand, sometimes we are not the best sales people for corporate IT and the website. We should be singing the praises like I just have about the waste contract and what have you that we put in there. I was up at Westridge earlier this week with the leader, and we met the people that actually use that. And by goodness, don't they sing the praises of corporate IT? I'm going to leave it at that. If I haven't answered anyone's question, come back and hit me with it, because I don't wish anyone to go home feeling that they haven't been attended to. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Stevens. And we will just run over to to Claire Shand to see if there's any comments from yourself there, Claire.
Thank you. Can I just check my microphone's working? Okay, excellent, super, thank you. And thank you very much indeed. And certainly from the proposal for the committee to continue to review the project, I'd be delighted to work with you in that respect, as I'm sure Councillor Stevens would do too. In the absence of having any specific questions from the committee in terms of what you would have liked to have seen in a report, I kind of worked on the basis of trying to do a bit of a potted history for you of the project to give you some of the background to the issues that have been experienced and to give you an update as to where we are at this particular moment in time. And I think perhaps the first thing that would be remiss of me not to say is that the website project is not an IT project. It is a council-wide transformation programme. IT just do the build of the system. The project team itself consists of communications team staff and IT staff and a project manager. And the content that's on our website is driven by the services that we have right across the council. And I don't know if you're aware or not, but there are some 2,000 web pages on our current website. And there are some, let me just double check. There are 1,300, just over 1,300 documents, published documents on our website that services use for the purposes of keeping our public informed. We have over 500 customer records on what's called the My Account facility, which we manage. There are some 180 forms, electronic forms, that connect to back office systems. That means that processes can be automated without people having to re-key in information behind the scenes. We've got some 56 in-house built systems that are connected to the website. For example, like the Green Waste subscription service, the book tipping collection, the tip booking facility, to name but a few. And those are things that generate over 1,000 transactions with the council each week as a minimum. And there are some significant other number of externally commissioned or purchased systems that run the council's businesses that are connected to the website. The planning portal being one of those. So it's an incredibly complex piece of work that needs to be done, and I guess it's really hard in some respects for us to try and help people understand just how complex that piece of work actually is. And appreciating, of course, that the public see, or we indeed see, the website as being the window to the council. And in terms of the website itself, we would agree that that's not the best website for what we need in the current climate and how people want to use that website and access the information and services that they need to. Now, just to kind of pick up on the planning portal issue, that's not a website problem. It's the external software system that's causing the problem, and the connectivity between when somebody clicks onto the link and goes through to the iDocs planning portal. Now, the IT team, I know, are working very hard behind the scenes to work with the supplier to try and find a resolution to what those issues are, appreciating, of course, that that's incredibly frustrating for people who want to use and access that system and can't. So I just felt it was really important to perhaps highlight some of those things. And what I hope you might have gleaned from the paper itself is that the decision to build in-house once again, rather than go to an external tendering process, was one that was driven by the fact that as a result of a number of years of lack of investment in the ICT infrastructure, it was necessary for us to put that right before we could even start looking at the website project itself. By then, it had already got out of date and was no longer being seen as being fit for purpose. The original intention, of course, of websites was very much based on the e-government agenda, which was throw as much information at your website as you possibly can that you think people might want to know about. That's not what people want anymore. And indeed, we recognise that. So a lot of the information we know is out of date. And is a massive information that needs to be undertaken. And of course, you rightly mentioned about accessibility. We've now got government legislation that's in place that sets very clear standards about how content has to be written on a website and how it's presented and can be accessed by our public. So those things were coming together all at particular one time. Now, I'm sure you would appreciate that whenever you are tendering something, you have to write a specification for it to be able to commission and be able to assess whether an external provider can give you all the things that you require and have the ability to monitor against that specification. If you can think without, and I mean, I'm not technical at all, but if you can just think about the various components of that website, which has a content management system in which all the content itself is transferred to. There's the My Account facility, which links to our customer relationship system, which is all coded into the website. There are all these numerous other software systems that are hard-coded into the website so that when you do look at it, it just looks like a seamless thing that you wouldn't know that there's all these complexities behind the scenes. Now, in any other organisation, or certainly from the organisations that Roger Brown, our strategic manager for ICT, undertook in terms of discussions with other local authorities, they've spent 12 months writing that specification and actually totally understanding what the full requirements are to be able to make some of those decisions. Time wasn't with us to be able to do that. And so we considered that we needed to commence building and replacing that website as soon as possible. Now, Councillor Lilly, you very helpfully suggested about working in partnership with other local authorities, and you're absolutely right. We all have very similar services, particularly if you're a unitary authority. But we have our own local policies. We have our own local conventions of doing things, and we all have our own different content and systems, and mentioned about systems again, that are connected to that. So whilst in principle that seems like an absolutely brilliant idea of surely we must be able to use what somebody else is doing, in reality that's not necessarily the case. Although clearly what we can do is work closely with other local authorities to learn from their experiences, and also share and learn from each other, and indeed that's clearly what we do. So I think in terms of the sequence of events, I think it was very unfortunate that COVID came along. I think probably one of the errors that we made was, rather than pause the project, we tried to carry on and make sure that we continued the work that needed to be done, despite the fact that the comms team were having to, by necessity, respond to a massive national emergency and making sure that our public were kept informed. Our own IT department were called away to work on other specific pieces of projects. And you'll note, obviously, that one of the things that was delivered during the pandemic was in fact the tip booking system. I'll get it right this time, so that people could return to disposing of their waste in a way that helped protect our public and the staff who worked there. And I think we welcome the internal audit report findings, and that's what they're there for. That's the value, as Councillor Garrett rightly highlighted, that they are a means by which to help us alert to anything that is likely to cause us going off the rails. And so that was welcomed, and as he set out, we have taken account of all of those points that were flagged with us. Just in terms of, just very quickly mention around risks, it would be remiss of any project or as an organisation not to really think about what are the key things that could derail a piece of work. And some of those things, in the same way that we have a strategic risk register that is reported through the quarterly performance report, there will be high risks, and some of those risks remain high and will always be high because of the nature of the risk. But what we do is identify ways in which we can mitigate those risks so that it doesn't happen. So I acknowledge that it might present itself as alarm. What we have got in place is mitigating actions that we've agreed we will take to make sure those things don't happen. But what we do also do is we have weekly project board meetings, and those risks are reviewed every single week. And we consider whether there is anything emerging that might realise one of those risks to allow us to determine what action we might need to take. So I hope that gives a degree of reassurance to committee members about where we're at. I'm pleased to say that we are currently on track in terms of the schedule of activities. And as I say, I'd be more than happy to share the progress and continue to respond to any concerns or issues that the committee has. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. Thank you for that. Yeah, I mean, technological matters are so complex and intricate, but as far as residents are concerned, they want to see a graceful swan floating along the water, not worry about what movement is under the water. Councillor Lilly.
No. Thank you for that very eloquent and articulate response, which was very clear. So thank you for that. I'm just going to go straight to a proposal, really, so that I think we can move on, because we have actually.
We can in a second or two. Councillor Jarman just wants to come in briefly, very briefly, and Councillor Garrett just wants to come back, and it was his matter. I'd just like to hear back from both of them. Councillor Jarman first, please.
Yes, thank you. My apologies for being on audio only. I'm afraid my bandwidth is somewhat limited where I am. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good. First of all, I'd like to thank Councillor Stevens for starting the process of getting to grips with this enormous beast. And I'll call it a beast because, you know, what Claire was talking about there shows you the extent of complexity that we have within a local authority, unitary authority system. It is an enormous beast with many points of complexity. And I think getting to grips with it is only the beginning. I'm also very pleased that he's managed to get Gavin Wight as an independent evaluator to come in and commence discussions with councillors and other people this week. My own interview with him is on Friday to try and do some evaluation of where we are and help form ideas of a way forward in terms of whether we progress down the track that we're currently on or whether we seek some other way of tackling the enormity of this beast. I think there are a lot of concerns that I have. I've shared them with my colleagues and I've shared them with Councillor Garrett. There's no time for me to go into them this evening, but they are quite extensive. I've iterated through these a number of times, and I think the way that we've dealt with expenditure in the past certainly needs to be looked at. The organisation and the scope of this is certainly something I have concerns about, and I do remain concerned about our ability to deliver on this. I'm also not sure whether, as scrutiny, you should not be taking a larger role, perhaps working with audit on this, to look at the detail of how we go forward as a council with this whole IT issue. And if we are looking at digitisation, then certainly we should make this quite a wide issue, not only focused on the enormity of those internal systems, but looking at the people we serve at the end of the day, the businesses and the people on the island. And I think every single one of us as councillors will have heard and probably experienced the issues with our own IT platform, gateways, the lack of an app, the lack of a chat system, and simply those things are quite enormous bolt-ons on a piecemeal basis. I do note from the report that we have some 500 pieces of the jigsaw already within our IT platform. And before we continue to spend more of that council taxpayers' money in this direction, we should be looking at whether this is the right direction and what the scope of a forward project should be. And perhaps that is something that scrutiny could turn its eye to. I'll leave it there because I think Councillor Garrett has other things to add.
Yes, thank you for that, Councillor Jarman. And frankly, the reason this is on the agenda this evening is because of that cooperation between scrutiny and audit. Because myself as chair of scrutiny and Councillor Garrett as chair of audit sat down and had a meeting and discussion about it, and we felt it should be on our agenda. Now, Councillor Garrett, and then I think we can go to a proposal.
Thank you, Chair, and that's been a very useful discussion there of those issues. Certainly, it would be welcome for corporate scrutiny to keep this on its work plan, and I think I certainly would say here is an opportunity. Perhaps it's done through a task and finish group, which brings together audit, corporate scrutiny, councillors, cabinet members and officers to look at some of the nitty-gritty as well. Claire Shand's discussion there of things is welcome for its candour about some of the areas in which things were difficult. What I would note from a broader perspective and a risk perspective is complex projects require intense effort and understanding, and so we as an organisation, the Isle of Wight Council, needs to learn from this so that any other complex project is done right from the very start. One thing I would say is there is a further audit follow-up being undertaken that during the remainder of this municipal, not municipal year, the year through to 2021-22, yeah, and that would of course be presented to audit committee potentially in March next year. So there is some space there in terms of time to look at some of the deeper issues here. But certainly, I think this is one of the ways we have shown that these two sides of the coins, as I said at the top of my presentation, of corporate scrutiny and audit working together, has indeed worked. And hopefully it will deliver something that the whole organisation will benefit from. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Garrett. And now Councillor Lilly, unless anybody else has anything. No. Councillor Lilly.
Okay, just from what you were just saying, Councillor Garrett, I've slightly amended my proposal. That the website report be noted, and the policy and the Corporate Scrutiny Committee includes this in its work plan in liaison with the Audit Committee, and establish a task and finish group to monitor and evaluate the website development progress.
Fabulous, thank you for that.
I have a seconder.
I'm just going to ask that very question. I've got first hand that went up was Councillor Luciani. Thank you. Luciani, sorry. I'll do that in 4 minutes then, thank you.
Well, I'm very pleased, I've got it now.
Okay, right, so that's the proposal and seconded. So those who approve.
Those in favour, please show. That's unanimous, Chairman.
Thank you, that's unanimous, yeah. Right, moving on.
Chair, can I?
Yes, sorry, Councillor Lilly.
Is it possible, because I'm conscious that unfortunately I have to go with Councillor Luciani back to Ryde at 7, to bring the item about the public health that's on the Cabinet first, because I do have views on that one.
Yes, I was going somewhere like that any second, yeah, on the announcement of this agenda item. Yeah, so it's item 7, and this is matters on the Cabinet, the very large Cabinet paper that we have here. And I think Councillor Quirk just wanted to come in briefly before we go forward, but then we will bring your item on after that.
Yes, we had a meeting of the chairs and vice chairs of the Policy and Scrutiny Committees and Corporate Scrutiny Committee, and looking at the capacity to scrutinise the immense agendas of Cabinet. And the problem is that Cabinet is not making any delegated decisions, even though there are a lot of fairly minor decisions that are not contentious that could be taken as Cabinet member delegated decisions. And we have a draft recommendation that came from that group, and I'll read it out. Following discussion between the chairman and vice chairman about the number of items featured on Cabinet agenda which are due to be reviewed at tonight's Corporate Scrutiny Committee, they have suggested a draft recommendation when starting agenda item 7. This as follows. The committee wishes to raise its concerns as to the number of items featuring on meetings of the Cabinet. This appears to be as a result of not implementing a Cabinet member delegated decision process, and is leading to an ineffective use of members' and officers' time in dealing with issues that are not controversial or has no major financial implication. Cabinet reports are not available to the Corporate Scrutiny Committee until shortly before the meeting, before it meets, giving insufficient time to understand an effective role of holding the Cabinet to account. The committee therefore requests that the Cabinet reviews its approach to decision making to ensure that it is an effective use of resources while still enabling transparency and accountability. I so move.
Thank you for that. Right, do we have somebody, anybody wish to second that? Councillor Robertson. Okie dokie. Then we shall go to a vote. All those in favour?
1, 2, 3.
Sorry, I think we need a discussion, Chairman. We just have a little bit of thought about it first.
Yes, you can do. Yeah, if you wish to make.
Sorry, I should have said it into the microphone. I was just saying, it's difficult. Sorry, that was the first I'd heard of this proposal, and it's suddenly thinking that, obviously there are reasons why the Cabinet chose to do this, and we're not going to be able to hear their point of view as to why they've chosen to do this. I think it was to do with openness and transparency at the time, but I'm not feeling in a position where I wish to say yes or no to. I mean, I think it's a good idea. It makes sense, but I think there's more to it than meets the eye. I think there's something else we haven't got the other side of it.
Okay, Councillor Lilly.
I agree with this. I feel the more I'm thinking of it as it's coming in, is I would want to, before we put a proposal, I would want to put a question first to the Cabinet, right? And I do feel that in your role as the Chair of Corporate Scrutiny, you can go to Cabinet and ask questions. I would ask the question before that we actually make a vote or decision on this, really. And then I think the question comes back to a future corporate scrutiny meeting, and then we can make a decision. Because we're actually, for me, I'm being asked to make a decision on something on a body that I would like to know their answer first before I make a proposal of that. So I think it's premature for us to go into a vote, and I am very uncomfortable with that.
Yeah, Councillor Quirk.
It's a strange way to get the answer before you get asked the question. This corporate scrutiny has the ability to come back and say, no, we don't accept your recommendation because there are very good reasons, and they can do that. But there are very good reasons actually to adopt a delegated decision. We have things on the agenda tonight that are trivial. They're not contentious. Why are they on our agenda? But we've got the papers there to read and to consider and try and find out that there might be some reason that they're on our agenda. And you have to read the papers to find out. And that's a nonsense. What we should have is the Cabinet delegating decisions that are not controversial, that are not financial, no major financial implications. They should operate a Cabinet properly. And I don't believe that they are.
Thank you for that. Councillor Robertson and then Councillor Lilly.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I continue to second Councillor Quirk's motion. It's for the Cabinet to answer to it. They may have an answer. Well, so let's deal with it. Let's put the motion forward and let's hear what Cabinet have to say. But going off to Cabinet tomorrow and having the question asked and then bring it back to corporate scrutiny to have a debate on whether we should ask the question formally, let's just put it to them and they can explain why traffic regulations are on here and some issues that just are not contentious and can be dealt with under delegated authority of the cabinet member.
I tend to agree with that. I mean, the question is there, isn't it, in this motion? It's asking the question of Cabinet. Councillor Lucioni. I said I'd get it in 4 minutes.
So my question is, if it's not controversial, why have we put it on the agenda?
Sorry, can you
If
just
you
say?
don't consider it controversial, can you not just take it off the agenda in future?
That's cabinet agenda.
What I'm actually saying, sorry, can I just ask the question? I know I understand what's on the agenda, I've seen it. But what I'm saying is, if you don't think some of them are controversial, why put them on the agenda? Do we have to do that?
Yeah, well, because that's the cabinet paper. The cabinet agenda comes to corporate scrutiny as a whole, in its whole, as what it is. Yeah. Well, no, you can't pick and choose. It's just that's the cabinet agenda. That's it. That's what we have in front of us. Councillor Lilly.
But we can decide what we wish to discuss. We can decide from that list, and we can decide from A to N. We just want to talk about F or G. That's the whole point. There is not compulsory that we actually have to discuss everything of the cabinet. So I disagree with it has been proposed and seconded, so we have to, under our constitutions, have a vote. I will be voting against this.
Councillor Quirk, very briefly, if you don't mind.
The cynic might say that the rationale for not making delegated decisions is to avoid scrutiny. If a decision if it comes to this meeting and we discuss it's on our agenda and we miss something, when it's picked up by other councillors afterwards, we can't bring it back unless additional information is actually delivered at the cabinet meetings. It's substantial information. Normally, delegated decisions can be called in by any member of the council. So the idea that it's more democratic to have the whole of the cabinet making a decision is actually fallacious. It works the other way around. And if you're cynical, you could say that that's a deliberate act. I'm not that cynical. Yeah.
Yes, as you wouldn't be surprised to hear that I pressed the button and we got a number of cabinet members that want to speak, but I'm not going to introduce that at this time because we will come back at this and we'll have a discussion with cabinet outside of this meeting on this subject. Meanwhile, we have the proposal from Councillor Quirk, who was seconding. I think it was Councillor Robertson. Let's have the vote. Those in favour, please show.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Those against?
1, 2, 3.
Any abstentions?
2. So that's carried, Chairman.
That's carried. Thank you very much.
Cabinet.
Okay. Oh yes, right. Now, cabinet agenda. And I am conscious that Councillor Lilly and Councillor Lucioni need to go before or by 7. So we will go straight to the housing matter, which is F.
Public health.
Oh, not that one. Oh, sorry, public health. I thought it said housing.
Chairman, for clarity, did you want to use the list on the corporate scrutiny papers, or did you want to use the cabinet agenda?
I'm looking at the our agenda on the scrutiny.
Shall I suggest that you go through the cabinet papers? It may be easier to use their agenda, Chairman. So you're looking for.
I'm looking at item 9B.
9B.
Okay, right. Well, Councillor Lilly, I guess you want to speak on the matter.
Yes, I do, and I would want to put a proposal to this. I'm a bit alarmed about this particular item for a number of reasons, right, on public health, which is basically recommending the continuation with the relationship with Hampshire. And it might be that's okay, right? I am concerned that it hasn't gone through some sort of process. I am Vice Chair of Health Scrutiny. This has not been discussed at Health Scrutiny, and Health Scrutiny should be the body to actually discuss this issue if we are going to continue with this relationship with Hampshire, because all the players are there, and if we're going to come, so I do feel very uncomfortable that this has come is going to Cabinet and is going to corporate scrutiny without full discussion. I have got that as part of my proposal. I'm also feeling that there needs to be some form of full independent review of this. We need to know that our relationship has worked, not just from an internal perspective, but we need someone else to actually say that. I've got a lot of experience in health, but I would like another set of eyes to look on this before we continue. We need to review that relationship. It's been for some time. We know that there's some issues with that relationship. Councillor Robinson himself has raised things at Health Scrutiny regarding public health and within that. We've also been through a very difficult time through the pandemic, and it's a very good time, I think, to review, because the needs of our public health have been very occupied, quite rightly, with with COVID, but we've got a huge amount of health needs that are a result of COVID, and we need to look into it. And in the report, there is very little or if no mention about mental health. And as the Isle of Wight Council's mental health champion, and being that I would say that mental well-being is one of the clear public health issues within that, and I haven't been consulted at all in regarding mental health, and I know others within that. So I'm calling. I'm not going to go into too much detail because I don't think this is the place. But I am actually wanting to say to Cabinet and the Cabinet member, can we put the brakes on this, and can we actually make sure it gets to Health Scrutiny? I know the chair of Health Scrutiny, Councillor Nicholson, will have just as much concerns as I have within that, and I know that there is concerns from iWalk in this regard as well, and I'll leave it to Councillor Karen to also say this. And I'm happy to put forward a proposal in this regard. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Anybody wish to, Councillor Palin?
Like Councillor Lilly, we're surprised by this report, as we were under the impression that the Alliance administration may potentially terminate this relationship with Hampshire. IWAC members have a lot of concerns and believe there may potentially be inaccuracies within this report. And of course, we can share these concerns with the Cabinet member directly once we've compiled them. And we'll also be requesting some evidence to back up particular statements. One of the main questions we have is about public health leadership and the lack of support during the pandemic for town and parish councils. We've also been told that the public health protection specialist based on the island was made redundant. Is this the case, and if so, why? And why is there no mention of what they're going to do to address health inequalities, a key public health priority? So they're some of the questions obviously we have around this, and we do have some scepticism around the relationship we have with Hampshire at the moment, and is it really the best for the island?
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Lilly.
I was going to say important point that Councillor Palin has actually raised at a Health Scrutiny meeting that actually had the Cabinet member and the Director of Public Health, Simon Bryan. It was made very clear that health inequalities was a key theme for the future strategy. Health inequalities has not fully gone into or mentioned in this report. So it is out of sync totally with what has actually been sort of said at previous meetings. I wish to put forward my proposal. My proposal is that the report be referred to Health Scrutiny for further comment, and that the Cabinet not make a decision at this stage until further consultation, and that there is a full independent review by an independent body.
Thank you for that. Do we have a seconder, Councillor Robertson? Okay, now, as you might imagine, the cabinet member has indicated he'd like to speak, but I'm not going to bring that forward at this time because I don't think it's necessary. As I think with the proposal and the seconder and that motion going forward, we'll get a vote on it, and that all that conversation will happen anyway outside of this meeting. Well, this can happen at health scrutiny.
I think that if we do the vote, I think it's right to ask the cabinet member to reply to that, and obviously whether he's willing to take on board what we're saying. So I think he should be allowed to.
I think we should do the vote and then
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so that's proposed by yourself and seconded by Councillor Robertson. All those in favour? And that's unanimous. I was just concerned that you were going to have to leave, Councillor Lilly, but if you've got time, we will go to the cabinet member. Councillor Love, then please come on in.
Thank you very much, Chair, I welcome all of the comments which have just been made here. So what we need to remember about this particular report is that it is about the public health partnership itself specifically and the relationship. Therefore, I wouldn't expect it to contain lots of detail about lots of element of the work which is undertaken, because it is very much about the relationship. I take on board totally what you've just stated there, and in fact I had intended to make an amendment, because in fact this report is only an interim report, subject to a full review next year. So in actual fact I will be amending that to represent that. So it would say something to the effect of that that we will carry the public health partnership forward, and that it would be subject to a full review in 2022 to be presented in autumn, so that we can make a proper decision about it. And that's because, and I make no bones about it, that I can only describe the initial relationship in terms of how the wording was. It's a gentleman's agreement that was made initially, and it needs to be underpinned with a service level agreement in terms of what that means. So therefore, given the short term in which we've been in as a new administration, we need to carry this forward until next year, where we can have a full independent LGA or independent review done of the service. Because I mean, I wrote down here that in actual fact, this is a report by officers to us, of which I'm a part of, which could be seen as self-indulgent in many ways, and therefore it does require further scrutiny. And I thank the members there for actually raising that. That was and is the intention. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you for that. I have a note here, the same Simon Bryant would like to comment. So Simon, if you're there, come on in.
Thank you. Just to back up what Councillor Lover said, wouldn't be a report about the detail of public health. It's much more about the partnership, so it wouldn't have some of those things. We do mention some of the mental health work and some of the work we improved, and there is a formal agreement between us. It started, as Councillor Love said, started off with an 18-month interim review, and then there is a formal agreement with kind of clear objectives between the two partnerships. I welcome any further review if that's helpful. But I do hope the report does set out the improvements that we've been able to make since we came in and improved both the quality and the standard of the public health and indeed the safety of the public health provision on the island. But I'll leave it there.
Thank you very much, Simon.
Chair, may I just add, I'm very happy to go to the health and wellbeing scrutiny. I'm very happy for that to happen.
Okay, that's excellent. Thank you very much. Okay, moving on. I know Michael and Karen now have to leave. Thank you very much for coming, and see you soon. What should we go? Okay, members, going to just run down this list and see if anybody has any comments or thoughts or questions on any of these matters as we go. We have closure of Carisbrooke College sixth form final decision. Okay, noted. Lowering the lowering the age range of Honey Hill Primary School consultation outcome. Noted. We now move to Dark Skies Initiative, which we heard quite a lot about earlier, but has anybody got, Councillor Quirk.
We heard some of the issues around this from Councillor Bacon earlier, and I do understand that it might be easier just to do sections of it and get there to start off with, but I would like to know how big a jump it is to actually go for the whole thing, and to actually include that Calbourne Wellow, because to me it seems pretty dark, and you know, is it that difficult to actually incorporate that and get the whole of that area as a single dark skies unit? And you know, is there an immense cost? Is this something, a lot of work? And the one thing that we do need to do if we get our dark skies is to withdraw the permitted development rights for putting skylights and conservatories in the West Wight.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, on the face of it, I hear what you say, and I agree to an extent, but we need to hear what the Cabinet member says about this. And I know one of my parishes, Calbourne, have written to the Cabinet member, and I'd be interested in that. I know he's responded, but I'd be interested in what their response is. And does it mean that we're going to deal with that part later? Why can't it be incorporated? So, Councillor Bacon, are you with us and available, please?
I am.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Can we just, yeah, go on.
Well, I was attempting to explain this earlier, but obviously being cut short. The requirement, I think there's a confusion between lighting policy across the island, which is going to be part, hopefully, of the new planning strategy, and satisfying the requirements of the International Dark Skies Association in Arizona. The former is proceeding, and there is lighting policy, etc., that will apply across the island. In terms of seeking the formal accreditation, we have to satisfy some very stringent criteria required by the organisation in Arizona. One of those is having an appropriate management structure for the area that is defined as the Dark Skies Park. And as I say, there are years of work that has gone into this, and the boundaries are set by where the AONB currently has management responsibilities. If we move outside that, we do not have a structure that will satisfy the International Dark Skies Association, and therefore our application would fail. So we are trying to go for something that is achievable. It means that we have a portion, hopefully, of the island that is formally accredited, but that will have an influence across the whole island, both in terms of its attractiveness as a location for viewing the night sky, but also, as I say, in terms of the wider policy, the planning strategy, of course, affects the whole island. So I'm conscious of the concerns and the wish to have dark skies across the island, but as I say, we need to have a regard to what the International Dark Skies Association in Arizona will actually accredit. And I'm really averse to upsetting a very long period of work that has taken place to get us to where we are, hopefully tomorrow evening. Of course, things can proceed after that. There is a suggestion that we may extend the boundaries of the AONB. We await, I suppose, if anything, that is hanging on the government response to the Glover report, which was due out this week but has now been delayed until the new year. That might tell us if that's a feasible possibility. If it is, then great, because we have the mechanism. We will then have the mechanism to extend our dark skies area, provided those areas we're looking to extend into do satisfy the actual light levels. But as Councillor Quirk and I think Hastings have said, many areas do. But it's just having that right combination of satisfying the criteria and having the structures in place that the body in Arizona requires.
Okay, thank you for that. That's understandable.
Chair, may I just ask?
Yes,
sorry
please,
to interrupt,
Peter.
but may I just ask Councillor Bacon? Would it be possible to extend it to include the Heritage Coast AONB and the Newtown Creek, because that would have the same management structure as the AONB, which seems to be one of your concerns. That area is extremely dark, and it would have the AONB management structure, and one could then proceed in due course with perhaps including the Kelbourne corridor.
As I say, the Kelbourne corridor is a different kettle of fish. It may be that there is scope to have the an area around Newtown. I think part of the problem, and I would actually prefer to have some professional assistance here, but I don't think we have anyone on the call who can give that. I think they are looking for a contiguous area as part of the problem. So the approach has always been to identify the largest single unified area which we can get the accreditation for. I stand to have further knowledge overstep me on that, but that seems to be one of the things we were talking about a few years ago as the area to be pursued was defined. I think what we should do, my view, is to get that accreditation where we can, as soon as we can, and then, yes, I'm more than happy for us to try and pursue further formal accreditation for other parts of the island where that is feasible. I don't think we should hold up the process to look into that, but we could look at that in due course. As I say, there are probably others in Vectis Astronomical Society who can give a bit more chapter and verse as to why we are where we are. But I know what they would say is let's actually get this sorted, because we know we can do what is proposed, but let's leave extending the area to the next step. But again, in terms of policy and effect, just because only one area of the island is formally designated through or credited through the International Dark Skies Association does not mean we cannot have sensible and beneficial lighting policy across the whole island for our own policies, and also does not mean that the whole island won't appreciate and benefit from the tourism, etc., benefits that have been seen in areas like Dumfries and Galloway, where the Dark Skies Park was created a few years ago.
Okay, thank you for that. So yeah, that makes sense, and hopeful for the future. Certainly Newtown Creek is very dark at night, has to be said. Anybody else? Any comments? Okay, thank you, Councillor Bacon. Now we move on then to Green Waste Subscription Service. Any questions or comments? Councillor Quirk.
I understand the desire to generate revenue in this section of the council. It is a hefty increase, 35%. In the papers, it says that there's no need to take an account of the impact on minority groups and things. I don't know what the stats are, but I suspect that a lot of the people who have the green waste are people who are retired, haven't got cars, and maybe there is a group of people who you are actually who are already vulnerable, who you are actually targeting. I just wonder whether that has been looked at and whether anyone has looked at the pattern of usage of the green waste services and ensured that isn't the case, that there isn't a bias there.
Okay, that's a good question. Thank you, Councillor Quirk. Councillor Bacon is right there to answer for us.
I think the other thing, perhaps to answer this in a slightly from a slightly different angle, is of course what we're hoping to do by this increase is to increase capacity in the service. There's a big waiting list, and it would be good, and it's a benefit for our environment generally, if we can make sure the service is available to more people, and that is certainly an aim in this. So I would actually say that I think the consideration is there, but the consideration is really thinking how can we make this service as widely available as possible, and to do that we need to increase capacity a bit, and therefore we need to increase cost a bit. We still are either below or I believe parity with other providers. So, you know, the aim is to make sure we have a service that best serves our community.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I would comment on that we are below our nearest competitor currently. However, once we add on, if we go for option 2, that's a 33% increase in cost. That actually puts us, and I know you talk about in the paper it talks £2 a month. That's lovely. That's sales talk. In reality, it actually brings us up to £96 per year rather than 72, and our competitor is running at 80. So I fear or have this concern that by leaping as quickly as that yes, we have a waiting list, but are we going to lose? What numbers are we going to lose because of that dramatic increase? And it is considerable. And so I just wonder if we're doing the right thing, or should it be re-looked at, and maybe there's option 3 that doesn't take it quite so dramatically all in one go.
Sorry, is that a question or a comment?
I just wonder if you had any thoughts on that as to whether we are risking losing more than we're gaining.
You increase the price of a service, you always risk losing someone. That is true across the board. But as I say, the judgment, it's a judgment for Cabinet tomorrow evening. They will make the decision, but the option is being put forward because there's a view that the overall benefit of such an increase will be greater, and as I say, will potentially benefit more people. And it's, I think the figures you've cited are current, but of course we know that other service providers, I think there's one that might be below us, but they are, I believe, due a price rise in any event. So I think the figures will become closer once more, which is why I used the word parity. Decision will be made tomorrow. It'll be interesting to see what the view of scrutiny is that they put forward following the discussion you'll have. But there is a judgment here, but the judgment is what is the best overall benefit for the island and for dealing with our green waste and enabling ourselves to deal with green waste as widely as possible.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Quigley.
Yeah, I think you said there's a waiting list, isn't there, Councillor Bacon, for people who want to use the service?
Yes.
So one thing's for sure is, in response to Councillor Quirk's comment, is everyone that uses the service will have gardens. Now, a lot of people that at the end of the scale where we're concerned about won't have gardens. So this isn't an essential service. This isn't like your general waste. So if there is a waiting list, also weighing up the opportunity cost of putting the stuff in your car and taking it to the tip and losing an afternoon or whatever it is I think I would agree with going, and it's not like me to say it, but I think I'd agree with going with a higher rise, because this could take a considerable amount of pressure off other services, and it's not an essential. This only affects people that choose to use it, and I think that's the critical point.
Okay, thank you.
Just interject, it's Councillor Quigley, just to assist you, it's paragraph 37 I was looking for. There are 1,200 potential customers on the waiting list.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Councillor Robertson, no, anybody else? Councillor Quirk, any further thoughts? Any proposal from anybody? Nope. Just noted and commented as such. Okay, thank you. Local council tax support scheme. Councillor Palin.
I just wanted to seek clarification, why wasn't the consultation done? Is there any reasons behind this? Was it budget constraints, time constraints? Since obviously the administration came in, was it a decision made by the previous administration and that actually there wasn't time to get it done? Is there a reason why this hasn't been done? And of course, we support it being retained this year, but would like to see it be increased in future years to come, as it's mentioned in the paper.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Jarman, are you there? Come in, Councillor Jarman, if you're still there.
He's had to attend a meeting in Newport.
Okie dokie. Well, we can't get the answer to that right now. We'll... Oh, yes, perhaps, yeah, Leader, while you're there, perhaps you could come in to answer that one. Hello, Leader, are you there?
Hang on a minute, you've moved down into the bottom of the screen. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
I'm just going to try and pick up because I want to answer this properly. I won't be, I'll be too...
Okay.
Would you like to go on to the next one while I find the email where I can get the actual wording?
Okay, yes, we'll come back to you on that one. Right. Anybody else got any comments on or questions on the local council tax scheme, or should we come back on that completely in a minute? All right. Next one is discretionary housing payment policy. Anybody got any comments, questions or thoughts? No, noted. Disposal of Ryde Harbour and adjoining land to Ryde Town Council. Councillor Palin.
I'd just like to congratulate Ryde Town Council, obviously as IWork members, for being able to secure this asset. And IWork members would like to welcome discussions with the Alawite Council for similar transfers of assets within their communities. We've done the same in East Cowes, of particular recreational grounds, and I just think it's a positive step for local communities and town councils running their local assets.
Okay, thank you for that. Anybody else? Councillor Quirk.
I think it's great that Ryde Council are taking it on. I would just caution them to do due diligence.
Yes, well, I think this has been running for some little while, and I would hope that they've done their due diligence to some extent by now. But yeah, hear what you're saying. Right, so we're going to move on to Isle of Wight skills plan. Anybody? Questions, comments, or just noted? So we just note that one. A strategy for provision of support with safe accommodation. Just noted, or no comments? No. Okay, noted. Review of public health partnership function. We've done that one. Isle of Wight Council, these are various streets traffic regulations. Anybody got a massive interest in these traffic regulations? I'm guessing both of these will be noted, unless I'm completely mistaken. Okay, that's noted. So we go back then to the local council tax support scheme. Leader, are you available and have you found your place now?
I can only apologise. I
That's all right.
absolutely cannot find the email that I received this afternoon. I am wondering whether it's been pulled, whether it's been deleted, but it's certainly, I cannot find it. What we are doing is we are definitely trying to keep at the 60% and not have a downward spiral. We are trying desperately to, oh, I know why I can't find it. It's because it's somewhere else and not on where it's not on the computer. Anyway, if you'd like to bring in Jonathan Bacon, because I think he's got the copy there. So Jonathan, can you come in if you've got the copy of it, please?
I can do if the chairman's happy with that. Is the chairman wanting?
Yeah, we want you to.
Are you there? Yes, carry on.
65%.
Yeah, I don't know. The statement that Laura was looking for is as follows. The annual budgetary changes during the last administration continue to reduce the amount of council tax support for those island residents in greatest need. On forming the Alliance administration and finding our financial position very challenging due to the inherited position and continuing government cuts, there were various discussions about moving from 65% to various figures between 40 and 60%. This range of options was discussed within the Alliance and with some other single-grouped councillors, following an initial suggestion that budgetary pressure would indicate a possible further reduction to at least 60%. And this is Laura speaking, not me. I took the decision to forego the 300 to 400k saving that further reduction to 60% would have brought, and to halt the pattern of decline by retaining the level at 65% for the coming year. Whilst halting the decline is a positive first step, and being mindful that I cannot bind future budgets, we must all make endeavours to reverse the previous trend and increase the level of support provided to those in greatest need. Quite simply, I and the Alliance are resolved that the Isle of Wight Council must try to ensure we are not the vehicle that drives families into poverty, unsustainable debt or homelessness.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Palin, does that answer your question? Okay, thank you very much. Yes, members, forward plan. Anybody got any thoughts, comments, questions around the forward plan? No? No, so shall we just note it on that matter? Okay. Then that brings us to our own work plan. Any comments, questions, thoughts on the work plan? Oh, did you want to come in there?
We will, of course, include the item from tonight about the council's website as part of the work plan.
Yeah. Yeah, that would be good. That will appear on the work plan any minute now. Okay. Anybody else? No, nothing? Just note our work plan. Oh, go on, Peter.
I was not going to ask a question about the work plan, but there's just one matter that, if it's appropriate now for me to raise, and that is in the course of Councillor Bacon's answering of a number of questions in relation to the draft island plan and the Task and Finish Committee's report, I gathered that the planning seminar, as it were, which is to take place on Friday, is going to include a critique of the Task and Finish Committee's report. And I'd simply ask if that's a proper way of going about it. If it's going to go into detail and make criticism of the Task and Finish Group's report, ought not that to be done by way of counter report rather than springing it on a planning seminar for members?
Yeah, I tend to agree. That should be dealt with separately and not part of that briefing. It wasn't part of that briefing, of course.
It does seem that it's going to be, because in particular, Councillor Bacon referred to the removal of 70 odd sites from the past plan and the comment that it was expected that 52 would come back in again. He took issue over the word expected. And if that sort of criticism is going to be made, it should be done in writing and on notice.
Yes, I tend to agree, but perhaps I think that probably what's the best way to deal with that? Probably if you contact Councillor Bacon outside of this meeting before that briefing.
I was hoping perhaps it could be a recommendation from tonight's meeting that no one knows what this seminar is about, but it seems that part of it is going to be about dissecting the Task and Finish Committee's report. Now, that should not be done under the guise of a general planning tutorial. That should be done by way of written response so that the Task and Finish group can respond properly to the critique. And if the planning seminar intends to do that, I consider it to be improper and outside, as it were, the scope of planning training seminars.
Yeah, I agree. Well, this briefing has been diarised for some while, hasn't it? Before anybody had any sight of your report.
I wasn't aware of it being diarised for very long.
Yeah, I think it's been in the diary for a while, as far as I know. It hasn't just all popped up in the last week or so. So I think whatever the briefing is about and for, yes, Councillor Quirk.
The fact that it's been there for some time doesn't mean that it might not have been, the agenda may not have been hijacked. I actually support what Councillor Spink is saying, that it shouldn't be sprung on that meeting if that's what the intention is, or that is the intention that part of that meeting should be that critique. That is inappropriate, getting people there under false pretenses for a training session.
Well, do we want to put something in as a proposal?
Well, could I assist, Chairman?
Who's that?
It's Councillor.
Oh, Councillor Bacon. Yeah, go
on. So I'm only speaking because Councillor Fuller's unable to be here anymore, I don't think. The report has only been prepared in the last few days because there was no advance notice of the content of the Task and Finish Group report. I was seeking to alert members of Scrutiny and generally to its existence. I don't think there's any suggestion of an agenda being hijacked. It's a document that could inform that meeting. If members don't want to see it and would rather wait until some other date to look at it, then fine. But I think Paul is intending to send it round so that you have the information there, because it does cover a wide range of issues, as indeed does the Task and Finish Group report, and is there for information, just so people can see it. If you don't want to consider it, and I can't say, because I'm not organising the briefing on Friday, what the agenda for that is or what it's going to lead on, but this report, I believe, was simply intended to inform the position, seeing as all members will have read a Task and Finish Group report and have a lot of issues about planning in their minds at the moment. So
Thank you. If I may, my suggestion would be that the document, whatever it is, a briefing, I thought it was a tutorial, but a briefing be circulated, that the tutorial on Friday be postponed until everyone's had a proper time to read the document.
I'm not sure when this is, the document can only, it's Wednesday now, so it will probably be coming out tomorrow with the briefing Friday. Yeah.
It's inappropriate if it is going to contain a critique of the Task and Finish Group. It's inappropriate that we would only have one day to prepare it. It's also inappropriate to advertise, as it were, a training seminar when the purpose of it either was at the outset or has now become a critique of a written report from a task and finish group.
Well, do you want to put a proposal?
My proposal, therefore, is that the report indicated by Councillor Bacon be circulated to all members as soon as possible, and that the so-called training seminar be adjourned until consideration has taken place of that report.
Is there a seconder for that?
Chair, can I clarify for you something, please?
Yes, please, Leader, carry on.
And Councillor Hastings, it's very nice to see you in the chair again. Can I just say that the meeting on Friday is just an island plan update, and that it's not being hoodwinked or anything else. It's just for mere clarification about the task and finish. But the main gist of the meeting on Friday is 3:30. It's a Teams only meeting, and it's an island plan update. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Councillor Spinkbody, are you happy? Well, if it's an island plan, and that's how I understood it all along, it was an island plan update briefing.
Well, it's very difficult to say whether I'm content or not, because I don't know really what the briefing is going to contain. Perhaps if the briefing notes...
I think you go along and listen.
Who was that? Who was that?
Councillor Stevens said, I think you should go along if you want to find out and listen, the same as, or put on Teams and understand what's coming out. If you don't want your report on there, Councillor Spink, that's fine. I think that Councillor Fuller will make sure that it's not. But I think it's an update, as has already been said, on the island plan. And I think that none of us know until we actually tune in. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Spink, what are your thoughts?
I would ask, please, that I've got nothing to hide. My report is out there. What I don't want is to be unfairly ambushed by a detailed analysis of the report to which I won't be able to make a response on the hoof, because I think that's grossly unfair. And if the seminar on Friday contains any of that, I shall object to the content at the time.
Of course, you can do that. Yeah, Councillor Robertson.
Chair, the issue as I see it is that it's a briefing on the island plan strategy, and there's a task and finish group report in relation to the same thing. Briefing suggests there's an official line, even if that official line is this is what we found out from the consultation. I share Councillor Spink's concern that any official line that seeks to criticise a report that has been through this committee tonight, that should be given to Councillor Spink in advance. It may be that the briefing is not to take a criticism of the task and finish group's report, in which case it's fine. But I think it's fair to say a briefing sounds like there will be an official speaker with official or formal views. And if those views are to go against the task and finish group report, Councillor Spink at the least needs to see that.
Excuse me. Yes, I tend to agree with that as well.
Can I clarify again? The meeting on Friday is an island plan update. I do not know where you're getting a briefing or anything else from. It is an island plan update. Thank you.
Well, if I may, Councillor PC Wilcott, we're getting the idea from Councillor Bacon, who said in the course of this meeting that there would be points taken on the task and finish report, and an example given was what was the evidential basis for the expression expected when the report comments that the 50-odd sites taken out, of the 72 sites taken out of the plan, 52 are expected to return. What I would ask, please, as far as this meeting is concerned, is to propose a motion that a full note of the briefing that takes place on Friday is circulated no later than 10 a.m. tomorrow. That's my proposal.
I think that's reasonable, and I think it was deemed to be distributed prior to that briefing. So, okay, yeah, well, we shall.
Is there a seconder for that?
Yeah, I was going to say we'll do that as a proposer. Seconder. Those in favour?
5, 6.
Those against? Abstentions? 1. Okay, that's carried. Sorry, yes, I forgot that one. Members' question time. It was under the. You asked yours, yeah. Members, any questions? Nobody on screen. Okay. Then that's the end of the meeting. Thank you all for coming. At 19:35. Thank you.